So hello and welcome to the Winning Agenda's coverage of a Core 2021 pack opening. My name's Jesse Marshall and I'm here with Jess Horrig.
Hey everyone, hope everyone's doing well. We're just going to do a bit of a pack opening today, a sort of unboxing of the new set, and also talking about the sort of cards and the dynamics of Magic 2021 in general, and also, just some regular stuff about what we've been up to and, how the Winning Agenda has been going recently since, we've been creating some content in a range of different fields, still Netrunner to some extent, but also Magic and Twilight Struggle, so really excited to share this Core 2021 experience with you.
So, this is Jesse going first with my pre-release pack, so I'm going to open this up, have a look at the cards, chat through first how excited I am to open up the particular cards, hopefully we get some sweet value, but then also how they might play out in a sealed environment. An limited environment. So, go ahead and open this up.
Oh wow, that's a big knife.
Wasn't quite sharp enough. Got in the second time. So.
Yeah, so I suppose looking at the packaging, it's Teferi is sort of the face of the set, which is pretty cool. I think he's been around ever since Time Spiral, or even before then, but in card form since Time Spiral, and yeah, I think he's a pretty interesting character. Is that a Rakdos symbol?
Yeah. So we've got I'm trying to get the focus on the symbol there. There's a lot of red going on in this camera shot, but yeah, we've got a bit of a Rakdos symbol on the dice. I'm not really sure what that means, but I guess probably Wizards might have had a little bit of trouble with the fact that there's 20-sided dice and this is M21, and perhaps their solution was just to put in old dice. But anyway, we'll go ahead and open up the first pack. So good to see a red and black dice, but hopefully we get actually some interesting cards in the packs. So first pack. We've got an MTG Arena ad. Now, are these packs going to be rares at the front, do you reckon?
I really have no idea.
That looks like a land. Okay, it might be land, rare, then uncommon. They keep changing pack order. So now we've got a mountain. Okay, it's the rare next. So we'll go straight to the rare. It looks like a creature. A Stormwing Entity. This one is extremely sweet in Limited, I think. It's not one of the strongest constructed cards. I'm just going to fix the focus here so we can have these cards a little larger. Where are we?
Oh yeah, that's not too bad.
So Stormwing Entity costs 3 less, so it costs 2 mana if you've cast an instant or sorcery spell this turn. It's got flying, prowess, and when it enters the battlefield you scry 2, and it's a 3/3. So if you can trigger this as a 2 mana 3/3 flyer with prowess that scries when it comes into the battlefield, that's a lot of value for 2 mana. And I think if you're in blue and you're playing anything like Opt or a range of the other cards that are available in Limited, you're going to be able to trigger this reasonably reliably.
For sure, and I think Opt would probably be the sort of best case scenario to be able to play this card a bit earlier in the game, but I think even, if you play it on turn 5 in a spells deck, then, you still get some value upon it coming into play, and you still have the prowess ability, which is really strong on a flyer especially.
Cool, so Stormwing Entity is the first rare. Epitaph Golem, so 5 cost 3/5, artifact, creature. Put target card from your graveyard on the bottom of your library. Stops you from being milled out, and has played that role in a couple of sets that it's been printed in, but I don't mind that.
Yeah, I think especially now that you have a sort of potentially a mill deck in the format, then, having these sort of safeguards, even if it's not going to be good in every situation, and, it is colorless, so taking it sort of prevents you from losing in that way, no matter what colors you are.
Cool. So I'll just get the rest of the packs and our special pre-release promo, which we'll leave up there for the moment. But we'll keep going through these packs. So we've got a Wildwood Scourge. It's a green and X, enters the battlefield with X+1/+1 counters, your usual kind of Hydra situation. Whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on another non-Hydra creature you control, put a +1/+1 counter on Wildwood Scourge. Synergizes well with White's +1/+1 counter theme. and can get bigger. It's kind of Ivy Elemental with upside, really.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, yeah, in a lot of situations, you'll be able to find another token maker not token maker, sorry, counter producer, +1/+1 counter producer, and this generates some incidental value every time you do that. And I like the fact that it can go at every point in your curve, so that no matter which token or counter producers you have, this can be in play before you play those other +1/+1 counter cards.
Yes, it eliminates a lot of the sequencing issues, because early on you can play this smaller and rely on it getting bigger, but if you draw it later, you can just play it bigger.
Definitely.
So it's kind of cool.
So really good for the green-white sort of counter deck.
Enthralling Hold is one that I don't find particularly enthralling straight off the bat, just because you have to let them hit you with their best creature before you can take it, and it also can't get rid of blockers.
I like the art. I haven't actually looked at the art before. Like, I knew it was sort of a piratey looking guy, but
Yeah.
I just thought that it was like a psychic thing. I didn't realize that someone had actually, some like hand that was actually grabbing him. I didn't realize that it was more literal, like a hold. I thought it was more metaphorical.
Yeah, that is kind of cool, isn't it? We also, whilst we're going through these cards, you might want to address Sammy's follow-up question. Was it fun playing on the professional tour?
Playing on the professional tour, yeah. I mean, if you want to be competitive at Magic, there sort of are a couple paths. And the Pro Tour, I mean, at least back in the day, I'm not sure about now, especially with everything going online, but I'll speak from my experience that back in the day, the Pro Tour was sort of the way to do it, which gave it a really different atmosphere from other tournaments, and one where, it was really good to see everyone. Just like any big international event, you see a lot of people who you haven't seen for a long time, and you often get to play against people who are, the best in the world, which I think is a really interesting experience if you're sort of competitive and you're looking to sort of become competitive.
Cool. So the next card is Dub, which is not terribly exciting, I don't think. It makes something a knight, gives it first strike, and gives +2/+2. It's nice on a lifelinker, nice on a death touch creature, but you're risking 2 for 1s.
Yeah, so I actually, until yesterday, when someone played it on Arena, I thought that it gave Vigilance, just because all the knights seem to have Vigilance.
Yeah.
But when my opponent tapped, I was really confused. But yeah, I think it's an interesting card, but in a lot of situations, giving first strike to your larger creatures isn't as useful. Usually you want to give it to your more smaller creatures. So probably not the best keyword in that respect.
Yeah. Sabertooth Mauler I have quite liked. I think the morbid theme is reasonably strong in this set. You've got a fair amount of sacrifice synergy in black in particular, obviously, but a black-green deck with a few of these, if they can reliably become 4/4s even on the turn they come down, that's great. But the fact that you can get this ability over and over and over again is pretty good.
Yeah, I really like how it triggers multiple times, and at some point it will just continue to trigger, if your creatures are large enough. And I think with a lot of the other morbid cards as well, they mostly trigger in your turn, so attacking is much better than blocking if you want to do this, and untapping on your turn sort of supports that, since it gives it sort of pseudo-vigilance ability.
Yeah, I definitely like that. Shock, not much that we need to say about it, other than I guess that removal is a little thinner in this set than in some other sets, so Shock's value probably goes up. Its Shock value is probably slightly higher.
Yeah, but I suppose Red still has a lot of good removal at common, which makes it pretty strong. And Shock, being able to get value by killing creatures that cost way more mana than the Shock does, it can be really powerful in a lot of scenarios.
Yeah. So I think Shock, Scorching Dragonfire, and Turn to Slag are all there at common for red, so 3 options is nice. This is one of my favourite commons, I think, from the set. Mist Raven was very good in Avacyn Restored as a 4-cost 2/2 flyer that bounced something, flying Mana War. This is a nice little ode to Mana War in the art, I think. It's a jellyfish spirit of sorts.
I didn't actually notice that.
That's what may be happening. I mean, I don't really know, but it kind of looks like it. And when it enters the battlefield, you bounce something. And it's a 3/2 flyer, which is reasonably sized as a threat.
Yeah, I think I like cards like this. I mean, of course, it's really strong, so you know
Yeah.
you're going to see it a lot in limited. But especially, I think for this one, the more interesting thing to me is that it's one of the only ones of these types of effects nowadays that lets you bounce your own creature. I think a
Oh,
lot
right.
of the other ones in the
Yeah,
more
yeah.
recent sets, like the Exclusion Mage, and I think there was one from Ikoria as
There
well.
was. Yep, yep.
That only
Pouncing
let you...
Shore Shark.
Yeah,
Yep.
the shark that only let you bounce your opponent's creatures, but I really like the ability to bounce your own creatures as well, since like you can rebuy comes into play abilities, and you can rescue your creatures from capture
Fetters.
fears, Faith's Fetters, capture spheres, and stuff like that. So I think that sort of gives it a neat little edge.
Yeah, cool. So that's another good one. So not too bad a pack so far, I have to say. Gloom Sower is not the best. We just talked about this one before we started the video, actually. It's quite expensive at 7, and even if you reanimate it as an 8/6, thinking that you've got some great value, it doesn't really have evasion. Like, it's got this sort of strange ability where it can drain for 2 if they block it, but it's a pretty large investment that you're putting in either to cast it or reanimate it most of the time.
Yes, although actually something that I realized just now, if they block it with more than one creature, does it happen more times?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a bit more interesting than I thought, since it's going to be pretty rare that your opponent will be able to block with only one creature.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, if you can get this down early, then, you can... I like that it at least gains you life even when you're trading, so that you can sort of do it again.
Yeah.
Since, usually if you're playing a card like this, you want to be trying to end the game with it. So, I like the fact that it sort of gains you life even in that scenario.
Cool. Next up, we've got Drowsing Pteranodon. So it's 2 cost 3/3, which is pretty great base stats, but it does have Defender. As long as you've got a creature with power 4 or greater, it can attack as though it didn't have Defender. This one's kind of hard to evaluate in a way. In some matchups against like a wide aggressive deck, having a 2-drop 3/3 can make a really huge difference. Green is generally playing a bit of a slower game, has quite a few really efficient and good 4 and 5 drops. So if your deck does have a few of those, getting this down on turn 2, I could see in a lot of matchups being quite helpful. And then the bonus of being able to sometimes just get in there later in the game once your good creatures do land. I feel like it kind of fits the theme pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I like that. I like the art, actually.
Yeah,
I think
just having a little snooze.
Yeah, I think it's quite fun. But I think, especially as a sideboard card against decks that have smaller creatures on the ground, like especially white or red aggressive decks, then having a turn 2 play is really important. So a card like this is perfect since it still has value later on in the game, even as you're trying to turn the corner and attack with your larger creatures.
Yep.
And often the problem with those kind of decks is that, if you play your 4/4s and 5/5s later on in the game, then, your opponent, if you're trying to attack to close the game, then often they can sort of double block and try and get some good value out of that.
Yeah.
So having more cards to attack in that scenario much more easily allows you to sort of turn the corner and end the game when your board advantage is sort of increasing in the late game against the aggressive decks.
Cool. So next up, we've got Lofty Denial, which I think I said in the set review does a pretty poor mana leak impression, and I kind of stand by that. Like, mana leak's never something I'm that excited to play, and I probably wouldn't really be that excited to play this, even though Spells is a deck.
Yeah, I'd say you'd probably want quite a few flyers before this becomes reliable. But, if you do have especially some 2-cost flyers, I know especially the white-blue uncommon Warden is really strong as a 2-cost flyer, and because it also, I think it reduces the cost of your other flyers. So if you can play that in addition to some other flyers, then it makes it a lot easier to hold up 2 mana, and I think if you can reliably trigger it, then it becomes a lot more powerful, since, you have maybe smaller creatures, but you're relying on keeping the tempo and not letting your opponent's larger creatures resolve. So I think this can be good in that scenario, but of course you would want to have a lot of flyers to make sure to reliably trigger it.
Cool. Celestial Enforcer is a 3-cost 2/3, which is reasonable stats. The ability, it is a bit weird to have a tapper that has so many restrictions. Like first, it costs 2 mana, and secondly, you can only use the tap ability sometimes, but it's a decent body.
Yeah, I think this card is quite good. I especially like it with Sky Scanner, just because Sky Scanner can go in basically any deck, and it's a body that is much less likely to die over the course of the game, since your opponents don't really want to spend a removal spell on it.
Yeah.
So I think that this sort of gains a lot of value there, and I think tappers in general, have a lot of potential in both aggressive and controlling decks, because in aggressive decks you can tap creatures twice, tap 2 creatures, one in the end step, one in your turn, and in controlling decks it's sort of a removal spell that you can change targets over the course of the game. So I really like cards like this for limited.
Cool. Onake Ogre, 3-cost 4/2 vanilla. There are a lot of effects that grant flying or other bonuses to creatures, or rely on the power of other creatures. There's the black uncommon that takes the power of the largest powered creature in your graveyard. So sometimes power matters, and in those sorts of situations this can be okay, but I still don't love this card.
Yeah, I would probably agree. I like cards like this, though, in general, just for limited, because, their value really depends on the other sort of cards that are in the matchup. So, if your opponent has a lot of 2/1s or maybe token makers, then this is a lot worse. But, if your opponent has mostly like 4/4s and 3/4s, then it can often trade up. Or if they're just slower in general and have like more pacifism and capture spheres and less shocks, then this can be powerful. So I like cards where their value can drastically change depending on the matchup, similar to a lot of other cards in this set.
And last in this pack is a capture sphere, which we've mentioned a couple of times already. It's the best piece of blue removal, I think, in the set, and yeah, it's one that I'm always pretty happy to have.
Yeah, I think these kind of cards are really good for limited, just because, having flash allows you to play it at a lot of different times, and it more supports other sort of blue, not just blue necessarily, but other sort of controlling strategies where you mostly want to play during your opponent's turn, and having cards that let you catch creatures that have already resolved are really important for that.
Cool. So we'll... Pack 1, not too bad, I think. Like, the common's quite strong, a really strong rare, and a few things to go with it, including, 2 of the best blue commons, I think, the Ghostlight and the Capture Sphere.
Yeah, definitely.
So not too bad on Pack 1. Pack 2. So we've got the bird token to start off. We'll just get this focus right again.
Oh, the tokens look a bit different.
Do they?
Oh, I
different
think so.
Templating?
I think
slightly?
the nameplate, I think, didn't always look like that.
We'll have to... Let's have a look. I think I got... Oh, there's an old bird token from Modern Horizons.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. It's exactly the same one.
That's funny.
Slightly different. I think it looks better, blending in with the colour of the text box a bit. Cool. So we've got a Bloodfell Caves. Interesting that these lands got reprinted. I think it is good to have them in your limited format.
Yeah, I think especially since there's no sort of Evolving Wilds or Terramorphic Expanse effect.
Yep.
Then these are going to be the main ways, especially that non-green decks can fix their mana.
Mm-hmm.
And I think especially in green decks, aside from Cultivate, which is an uncommon, there's not even a lot of color fixing even in green.
No.
So I think, I like that these are sort of going to be the main ways to splash a third color, since, they're pretty flexible and they go in a lot of decks.
Cool. And so we're looking at a foil in this pack, and it's a Snare Spinner. Not much to say about that. It's a decent green creature.
Yeah, and, I like the foiling. It's pretty. I like how the spider seems to be in the foreground, and then is it the hedrons or those hedrons? Yeah, seem to be in the background. So that's sort of fun.
Cool. So we'll head on to the rare, a Ghostly Pilferer. So this, if we were 2 packs into a sealed pool here right now, I think you'd be pretty happy.
You'd be happy with the blue cards, especially.
Yeah, I mean you'd be happy having 2 rares of the same color both of which are pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one, it's decent, gets a bit of damage in, and if they don't have a blocker, which I'm not convinced is going to happen a whole heap in this format, particularly if you're playing against a white white deck. But if you are playing against a green deck, there's a chance that they won't have a play on kind of turn 2. Or if you can play this on turn 2 and then bounce or remove their turn 3 play, and you're on the play, there's a decent chance you get to trigger its draw ability, by which point I think it's quite good.
For sure, and it's a bit strange, I think the second ability is quite clearly for constructed. So, it's a weird card in general, but yeah, I think it has, quite a few upsides or possibilities. I think the only thing is that compared to a regular looter type effect, a creature like Teferi's Prodigy that just draws and discards, then you risk a little bit more by having to discard first.
Yes.
So you're discarding, and then if your opponent kills it on their turn, then you potentially lose out on some advantage. But I think, the other upsides of this, mainly that it can just generate clean card advantage, makes it strong in that respect.
All right, so that's rare number 2. So we've got one of the Sanctums. So you haven't loved these so far.
I wouldn't say so. I think that just looking at them by themselves, not necessarily looking at an especially Sanctum-focused deck, but maybe in a 2-color deck with 2 Sanctums, or maybe splashing a third, which even then is not going to be super common, at least in draft, maybe more common in sealed.
It is worth saying the black one is the best to play multiples, I think. Both the black and blue and green, actually.
You can't play any of them in
multiples.
They're legendary.
Of course.
But yeah, I think in general, I think this is interesting because it lets you, I suppose, get rid of the duplicates.
Yeah.
But then, having to... And I think if you do have two Sanctums, getting to trade a land later on in the game for a shock is strong, but I think it's hard to get to that point in a regular game unless you really have 3 or 4 and can reliably get them early. I think just having this by itself is far too low impact to have an impact on most games.
And I don't like how this asks an extra card of you. You've already invested a card in playing it. Why should you have to pay another card to get any effect out of it?
Yeah, so it really, I think, makes it a late game only thing.
Yeah.
And so would be mostly used in support of the other Sanctums.
Jeskai Elder, speaking of looters, this one is another kind of weird looter in that you can't successfully loot with it unless you can get through. And I kind of wonder whether things like Thieving Otter or, Ophidian type effects, you put the work in and you actually net a card. This one you don't net a card if you put the work in, but it's a 2-drop, whereas most of those tend to be 3-drops. So I don't know. I'm not quite sure where this sits. I think in a blue-red spells deck, it can be quite a good piece just as a creature with the loot effect as a bonus, but yeah.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think in a deck that's pretty low to the ground, both of the abilities can be really powerful. Mm-hmm. Both the, prowess, if most of your creatures have prowess, you get a 2-drop prowess creature to go with your 3 and 4-drop spells matter creatures, which is good, as well as being able to loot away extra lands in the mid to late game, which can be good as well. So I think in that kind of deck where you're really trying to push your advantage, then this can be powerful. But I think in other types of decks, it sort of falls short a bit and requires a bit more setup.
Cool. Got a Kinetic Augur. Forecast X4 Trample. X is equal to the number of instants and sorceries in your graveyard. When it enters the battlefield, discard up to 2 cards, then draw that many cards. So you can't cheat and get extra cards, but you can get rid of excess lands. Or instants and sorceries that aren't doing heaps. So, yeah, I quite like this. The Spells Matters is a theme, and it can be quite big.
Yeah, I think Spells Matters has been a pretty powerful theme, at least in a lot of the drafts that I've played in so far, especially having Spell Gorger Weird at common, since that card can grow really quickly, simply with, Crash Through, Thrill of Possibilities, and other cheap spells. So this is a card in a similar vein, And I think that sort of goes to Sammy's point about prowess in general
Yeah.
in sealed. So yeah, I would build towards it, especially Spellgorge are weird in this one,
Yeah.
which have sort of more permanent bonuses.
Yeah.
Or cards like Goblin Wizardry. I like that one especially since it is an instant or sorcery, which means it triggers prowess and it also gives you more prowess cards. I think that's a sort of clean way to solve a lot of the problems that those decks have often had. So I think, yeah, I would definitely play more cheaper spells like the Crash Through or the Thrill of Possibilities or the blue ones, I suppose, which are already mostly good anyway. But I would probably play more cheaper spells, even if I had a couple Spellgorger Weirds or Goblin Wizardries, just because of the possibility of getting a lot of advantage from a very small mana investment.
I feel like an X4 is also a very good size in this format.
Yeah, especially to have trample and have an unbounded power.
Yep.
Like, that makes it a strong card, especially in the late game. And I think a lot of the cards like this in the prowess deck, like the Jeskai Elder and the Kinetic Augur that we've seen, they both sort of reward you for having like a very high card density, like not very many lands and lots of cards that draw cards, lots of spells that draw cards. So I think those cards are things to keep in mind, that it's really good to have those sort of cheap enabling spells in a lot of your prowess decks.
Yeah, cool. So we've got a Prismite up next. Not one that I'm ever terribly excited about, but like you said, there isn't a lot of fixing in this format, so I could see it being played every now and then.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially if you just need some fixing for your splash color and you need a 2-drop, you can do worse. I do like that it's colorless, so taking one sort of hedges you against a lot of situations. But yeah, of course, it doesn't provide you with a ton of advantage at any point in the game.
Llanowar Visionary. Combining Elvish Visionary and Llanowar Elves in both name and effect.
Yeah, some inspired design.
I'm pretty happy with it. Creatures that cantrip and accelerate. There's a reason that both Elvish Visionary and Llanowar Elves are good cards, and I don't think having it cost 3 really makes it that much worse.
Yeah, I sort of agree. I suppose that the only thing I would say is that compared to Llanowar Elves, it's a lot less good at accelerating you into other cards earlier.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even if you have this, it's not really that feasible to start your curve at 5. You still need some more 2s, 3s, and 4s. But in terms of being able to play like multiple spells in a turn, or especially use your land drops later for some other value, like with the Looter, the Teferi's Prodigy or something like that, I think that makes it really powerful, since this gives you both another card and a mana source in itself.
Yeah.
So it really overperforms in that respect, even though it's not as good as at sort of deploying your bigger spells faster.
And what I like about it is that you get the choice. Like, it's got 2 modes, really. Like, one is you can play it, get your card back immediately, and then block something. And that can be good. Like, killing one of their 3/1s or something and just putting it in front as a roadblock as you kind of ramp up towards bigger things naturally can work. But if the game situation allows you some more flexibility, this can function as a 2/2, which can even be down, or it can accelerate you into bigger threats. So I kind of like it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Me too. I think it's a really strong card.
Masked Blackguard is a 2-cost 2/1, and I think that's really mostly what this is going to be. Like, if you want a 2-cost 2/1 in your deck, then you play it. If you have a few other 2-drops, you're probably not going to play this. But the fact that it's a 2-cost 2/1 that works on your curve, plus also being able to maybe flash in an ambush and kill a 1-power creature for 5 or a 2-power creature for 8 later in the game, gives it some additional effect.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, it's a card that, has some value at every point in the game. And, I think that, as you said, the main thing would be to trade with, potentially have the possibility to trade with creatures larger than it, which is not too bad for a 2-drop, even if it does cost a lot of mana to do so.
Yeah. Next up, Furor of the Bitten. 1 mana for +2/+2, given how many flyers there are, I feel like that's reasonably appealing to me. It goes well on a Concordia Pegasus. It goes well on the Windrake variant with prowess. I forget what it's called, but yeah, I feel like there are a lot of reasonable targets for this. Obviously, you still, as with all auras that don't replace themselves or offer you any value, risk being 2-for-1. But there was a reason that Madcap skills was very good in Gatecrash, because the ability to, at a really mana efficient rate, pump up creatures and give them some evasion was really good. This doesn't give evasion, but I think there's enough natural evasion in a few colors that it can work out.
Sure, so that was a card from Gatecrash that gave a creature +3/+0, and it meant it needed 2 creatures to block it. So that sort of worked in a similar way or gave it menace.
Yeah,
that's what you call it nowadays. So that sort of worked by meaning that your opponent, if they were sort of blocking and looking to trade, then they couldn't, at least for one turn. I think this has a similar ability in that the toughness boost allows it to, if you both have 3/3s, then you play this, then suddenly not only are you hitting for more damage, but also they can't block effectively. I think if you can get to that situation, as you said, with natural evasion or with removal, then it's a lot stronger. If your creatures are more are more useful because of their natural stats, then it's not as strong, because you'll more often get into board stalls and your opponent will be sort of sitting back with more creatures. But definitely paired with evasion, it can be powerful.
Yeah, but still has all the aforementioned drawbacks. Yeah. Frost Breath, obviously a really good tempo spell, quite efficiently costed for what it does, and instant. And you can either deprive someone of 2 blocks and 1 attack, or 1 attack and 2 blocks with this, because of that doesn't untap during the next untap step. That is a reasonable effect, but you must be a very tempo-oriented deck, otherwise losing the card is not worth the tempo.
Yeah, I think that's true, and that these kind of cards sort of, as you said, require a sort of setup to be good, because you need to both have your creatures staring down, but if you can get into a race situation where both the attacking and the blocking are really valuable to your opponent, then this can be good. If you're only looking to more do one of these things, then it's not as powerful.
Next up is Pride Malkin. 3 cost 2/1 cat. When it enters the battlefield, +1/+1 counter on it or another creature you control. Every creature you control with a +1/+1 counter has trample. So base case scenario is a 3 cost 3/2 trample. That's okay.
It's decent. I mean, it's not the best, and I think this sort of loses out by green having a lot of good 3-drops already.
Yeah.
With the Truffle Snout and the Lanois Visionary that we talked about. I think that's probably the main downside. I think in terms of the other effects of the card, having 3 power, 2 toughness that you can sort of distribute is good, especially when the +1/+1 can also have the benefit of giving a larger creature trample. But then, I think it's really strong in a more +1/+1 counters oriented deck.
So green-white mostly.
Yeah, so green-white mostly. I think in the other sort of colours, then the Truffle Snout or the Lanois Visionary are probably going to be your preferred green 3-drops.
Right. Cryptolocker is a pretty vanilla 3/4. I mean, the ability, yes, sometimes you're going to have a creature to discard, but rarely do you have creatures in your deck that you want to just pitch, unless you're playing Reanimate. Sacrificing your creature in play takes a bit of work. So really, a lot of the time, I think on turn 4, this is really just going to be, do you want a 4 cost 3/4?
Yeah, so as you said, discarding a creature card to draw a card when you have 4 mana isn't probably the best rummage effect. Usually when you have 4 mana, you want to discard lands. Your excess lands, you less often want to discard spells. So this is not as good from that perspective. And I think there are not as many sacrifice outlets in this, token makers in this set that I've seen, like 1/1 token makers that can get good value out of this. I think if there were more of those in colors that synergized well with this, then this would be more powerful, or incidental 1/1 bodies, but that hasn't really seemed to be the case so far. But still, 4 mana 3/4 is not the worst, has the potential to give you a bit of value when it comes into play, still makes a solid card, I think.
Revitalize, so 2 mana, gain 3 life, draw a card. A little better in this set than previously because there is a bit of life gain matters going around, but still not amazing.
Yeah, I think life gain matters and spells matters can both use this effectively to some extent, but, you know, it's never going to have the most impact on the game. But still, you know, I think especially with the life gain matters, there are some situations in which you would want a card like this, although those type of decks more seem like they more want to build up life gain on the board rather than playing a one-shot life gain. It's more like a gradual advantage, so probably not as good in that respect, but still has a couple of niche uses.
And last card in the pack is the now oft reprinted Thrill of Possibility, which seems to be in just about every set. So as an additional cost, discard a card, draw 2 cards. It's instant speed, but it's a 2 for 2.
Yeah, it looks very red in the art.
In the art? Yeah, perhaps it's gotten more red over time.
Yeah, I think, the art especially, rather than the border. But yeah, I mean, this is sort of a solid role player, like, in, you know, Spells Matters decks, as we mentioned, which are often in red, this can be strong. But I mean, in general, it doesn't have the most impact on a game when you play it, since, you know, it's not card advantage, you're just trading your cards for other ones. And there are a lot of situations in which you don't want to do that, but I think if you can get some value out of it some other way, then it's a bit more powerful.
So in a red-black Reanimator, where you're wanting to pitch things, this could be a lot better. Yep.
For sure.
Cool. So that brings us to the end of pack 2. Not as good, I don't think, as pack 1. Probably a few more mediocre commons. The Llanowar Visuary was nice, and we got the 2 nice prowess cards, I think, the Jess Coyote and the Kinetic Augur. And we've still got the 2 blue rares there. So pack number 3.
Oh, I like that construct.
We'll get the focus right on this construct.
Yeah, I do like the sort of borderless art. I think it's quite pretty.
Where are we? Still haven't got the focus. One sec. Fix that up. There we go. The borderless art is nice. So 4/4. So we got Showcase Planes.
Oh, what's that?
So these are the showcase lands. There's one for each of the planeswalkers.
Oh, okay.
In each color.
So
and
what are they?
Well, they're just basic lands that look pretty.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
that's cool.
So anyway.
And have, I suppose, the different frame.
Yeah, slightly different, kind of weird frame, and then slightly different text box as well. Oh, that's always nice. And next should be the rare.
Oh, that's a good one.
Mythic number 1. All right. So, I mean, there's very little that needs to be said about this. In limited, it's a massacre.
Yeah, so, you know, 6 mana, 6/5 already strong. Basically gets value when you play it, no matter what. Only drawback, I think, is the three black symbols.
Yeah.
But I think even as a 7 or 8 mana card, it would still be ridiculous.
Great. Yeah. That's going to make the deck most of the time. Tempered Veteran. It's decent. 2 mana, 1/2. It can this is another count as matters card, so like works well with things like the Pride Malkin or Basri's Acolyte, and then being able to later on spend your mana pumping your whole team so long as they've been pumped already is good.
Yeah, I think this card is really strong. I mean, as you said, it is definitely count as matters card, but I think just a card that has value even by itself, being able to just grow creatures naturally, because it costs 6 mana the first time and then 1 mana each subsequent time, and it can even target itself. I think this is a really strong card in a lot of different decks, not necessarily just tokens, count as matters ones.
Cool. Warden of the Woods. 6 mana, 5/7 vigilance. When it becomes the target of a spell or ability your opponent controls, you may draw 2 cards. So it's not hexproof, but your opponent pays a significant cost for targeting this.
Yeah, so this guy doesn't have reach, which I sort of thought it did first looking at it, just because of, the dynamic and the art and everything.
Yeah.
But I think even without that, it's really strong. Like a 6 mana 5/7 Vigilance already basically takes over any board where you play it.
Yeah.
And most of the time it'll demand a removal spell. Like, I think it's only in the case of flyers that your opponent will actually be able to get past it. So yeah, I think this card is really strong, even if it is 6 mana.
Cool. Fierce Empath is another nice one. So it searches for the aforementioned Warden of the Woods. And it's just a nice 2-for-1, I think. Like, I mean, part of your 2-for-1 is a 1/1 for 3. So maybe it's a 1.5 for 1, but still.
Yeah, I think in some matchups it can be strong. I think the main drawback is that unless you have some really strong, say 6 drops, 6 and 7 drops especially, then it's a lot of the time you want to spend your earlier turns rather than drawing cards, sort of ramping your mana or making it easy to play your expensive cards.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a bit harder on the deck building because you want to play lots of expensive cards to make this good, but then in general your deck doesn't want too many expensive cards. So I think you'd really want to have a couple good targets for this that are good if you just draw them naturally as well.
Cool. Scorching Dragonfire, which is a nice piece of removal. I don't think we need to say too much about that.
Yeah, again, very, very red art.
Yeah, I think it might be a little bit of the colouring on the camera.
I think so.
Mind Rot, never one that I'm too excited to play, and I think reasonably mediocre here as well.
Yeah, I mean, sort of, it can be good, especially if your opponent has mulliganed, but, not impacting the board and being a bit situational makes it a bit weaker.
Rookie Mistake is a trick that I really like, actually. The fact that it can save one of your creatures. If you've got 4 creatures battling, 2 of yours and 2 of theirs, it can save yours in one of the fights and kill theirs in the other one.
Yeah, I think especially in flyers, decks with a lot of flyers, it can be stronger, just because those are the sort of situations where, it can save your creature from having a removal spell pointed at it.
Yeah.
And you might be blocking when this might be useful. So I think the only drawback with this is that you often in those kind of decks you have a very limited number of non-creature spells that you can play, but this is can be one of the stronger ones.
And I don't think it's too bad in the Spells Matters decks either.
For sure.
Daybreak Charger, 2 cost 3/1. We've seen as a vanilla card. We then saw it upgraded to exile something from a graveyard in a Theros Beyond Death when it dies. But I think giving +2/+0 when it comes into play is even better. Like, it's very strong ability, I think.
Definitely. Having a draw stronger, potentially even stronger sometimes when you draw it later, just because it lets you break through with some of your creatures can be really good. I think this card is just strong at all points in the game. I think the only weakness is a common weakness with 3/1s that, in a lot of matchups there are just some incidental ways to kill 1 toughness creatures.
Yeah.
So that might bear out poorly in some matchups, but in general it seems quite strong.
Cool. Goblin Arsonist is one of those incidental ways to kill 1 toughness creatures, but I don't love it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has some advantages. Being able to trade for a 2 toughness creature in combat for only 1 mana makes it a good card in some, sacrifice decks as well.
Yeah.
I think if you can kill a creature and if you can have a one mana card that blocks a often 2 or 3 mana card, then that gives you a bit of mana advantage if you're blocking. And then if you can sacrifice it to sort of disrupt your opponent a little bit, it can be a good role player. But, one mana cards really have to have a big impact on the game to be worth the card, just because of how much weaker they can be when you draw them later. But yeah. I still think in some sacrifice decks, especially with the Fiend that grows,
yep,
it can have some value.
Short Sword is outclassed, I think, by the black uncommon, which does largely a similar thing but grows over the course of the game. It's okay. 1 to equip is always pretty good for equipment, but I'd probably see this mostly again in a Flyers deck.
Yeah, I think it can be strong in that sort of situation when you're mostly racing, but I think the fact that Turn to Slag is at common, which can easily can easily destroy this with no value, as well as Rambunctious Mutt.
Yep.
They both can, pick this off without losing a card. Makes this a lot weaker. But I still think in some matchups, you really just want to deploy, say, 2 and 3 mana flyers and then sort of race your opponent. I think especially with the 2/2 prowess flyer, it can be strong if you have multiples of those.
Deathbloom Thallid is one that does work reasonably well, actually, with the 4 cost.
With the Cryptolocker,
Cryptolocker, yes.
So I think that's one of the main sort of synergies that I've seen in black so far, is to play this, trade it off, with a 2 or 3 mana play, and then eat the 1/1 token for a card.
Yep.
I think that's a perfectly valid thing to do, and that makes this card a pretty good role player in a lot of decks. I think the only weakness would be, as I said before, that there are quite a few solid 3-drops in a lot of the colors, it seems.
Yeah.
Like green, I think black as well, although I can't think of many right now.
There is another one, but I can't recall.
Yeah.
Yeah. Titanic Growth. +4/+4. So it costs 1 more than Giant Growth, but you get more out of it. It's just a decent trick. It's not amazing, but it's decent.
Yeah, pretty solid. Better the more aggressive you are. I think in general, the green decks that sort of want to play 4, 5, and 6 mana cards don't want it. But, I think the lower to the ground green decks that pair with blue or white, when you're mostly attacking, I think that's where this is going to be stronger. Or even red, potentially, if you're base red, but probably not as much if you're a green-black or slower green-blue deck.
Valorous Steed. I really like this, I have to say. I mean, it's a little slow, but 5 power and 5 toughness for 5 mana, all vigilant, across 2 separate creatures. Yeah, I quite like it.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think it has a couple of benefits. As you said, 5 mana for 5 power, and good with multiple creatures. I've also gotten to play it with the creature that has double strike and pumps with double strike, which is really good with vigilance creatures as well, since you get double value out of your attackers. So I think there are quite a few synergies where this is that make this card strong, and I think even the more mid-range decks, maybe the not the super low to the ground aggressive decks, but anything other than that, you can usually play a couple of 5 drops, especially if they do as good a job at stabilizing the board as this does.
And then Igneous Cur.
Ingenious Cur.
Not ingenious, igneous.
Well, it might be ingenious. You don't know. I mean, if you're a dog on fire, you probably have to do a fair bit to survive in the world,
That is true. And yes, it's certainly not meant to be an indoor pet. 2 cost 1/2 with fire breathing of sorts. It's not too bad as a 2-drop, but I don't love the fire breathing cards that really are only decent in combat if you fire breathe.
Yeah, I think these kind of cards, if you attack and then they block with their 2/2, you almost, wish that you didn't have to spend your 3rd turn trading.
Yeah.
I think the main advantage to this is that you can get it with the Houndmaster, which is the red-white signpost uncommon, the Alpine Houndmaster, which lets you find the Igneous Cur and the Watchdog. Yep. So I think this, gets some value from that, just because, especially in your low to the ground aggressive decks, just getting some free cards, I mean, in any deck really is sort of what you want, and this has a good use for excess mana in the later game, but I don't, as an early play, it's not the strongest.
Cool. So that brings us to the end of pack 3. So we'll just go ahead and get into pack 4.
Yeah, we have an extra viewer now.
Hello.
Oh, that's
so
good.
Welcome along to our viewers. Feel free to jump in the chat with any questions or let us know what you think.
Definitely. So to catch everyone up who's just tuned in, it's Jess and Jesse here from the Winning Agenda, and we've mostly just been going through some Magic Core Set 2021 packs, just looking at the sort of some of the cards in Limited, as well as just how each card would play in your environment. Oh, so Chifley, hi, I'm the extra viewer. You can thank Sammy for inviting me. Oh,
welcome along, Chifley. And yes, that is a mythic in the background, the one and only Massacre Worm. So our rares so far in this pool are Massacre Worm, Ghostly Pilferer, and Stormwing Entity.
Yeah, so
pack number 4, Sapling Token. Get rid of that. A Tranquil Cove, so we have blue-white fixing now. In addition, that's our second one. I think we had black-red in the previous pack.
Yeah.
Scavenging Ooze. All right. Ooze.
Yes, I think, these kind of cards are pretty good in terms of being strong at every point in the game. A 2-drop that's good on turn 2, as well as when you draw it later when the graveyards are more stocked, can be really powerful. And it really doesn't take much work for this to grow into a 4/4/5/5. So I think, this card is really good. And I'd be happy to have it in basically all of my green decks, as well as it providing some incidental advantage against, even the Spells Matters decks have some graveyard recursion, as well as the dedicated Reanimator decks.
Yeah. Can this be a cat oven? Says JW.
Definitely, right?
Well, it's useful.
Well, would this be... I think so. I mean...
So hang on. They sacrifice the food to return the cat to play, and then you exile the cat in response.
So it depends on how many foods they have.
Versus how many green mana you have.
But given that they have to do that basically every time, then I think this could be definitely a very good card in Constructed against Cauldron Familiar strategies.
Yeah. Great question, JW. Indulging Patrician. So this is the black-white signpost uncommon, which if you gain 3 or more life this turn, each opponent loses 3 life. I mean, that's a significant chunk off a 3 mana card, I should say.
Yeah, so I think, it's clear to say that if you can pump this one up with like the scarring that we talked about earlier, which gives a +2/+0, or maybe a Basri's Acolyte or something like that, then you can easily have it trigger the life gain itself, which is almost certainly the most powerful mode of it. If you can just have it attacking for 6 damage, then 6 damage, some of it with lifelink, then you can close the game really quickly. And I mean, just by itself, a 1/4 flying lifelink does a good job of stabilizing the board, so I don't think you need too many ways for it to be good. But I think, as I said before with the Revitalize, I get the impression that the black-white decks are more looking for on-board advantage, on-board ways to gain life, rather than sort of one-shot effects.
Yep. But this does contribute to that, which is good.
Yeah, definitely.
And the flying's easy to miss with the amount of text on this card.
Yeah,
It's pretty good.
It's not really... They're not really flying, are they?
No, it doesn't seem that way.
Well, I mean, there are some bats in the background.
Actually, that's the moon in the background. So perhaps they are levitating.
Right, but I mean, you can easily just like be on a roof.
That's true.
And have the moon in the background, so...
That's true. So another Fierce Empath. I think we've said all that needs to be said about that. Another Enthralling Hold. Look at the little hand on that guy's head.
Yeah,
Definitely
I think...
plucking him.
Yeah.
Watered Battlements. I actually don't mind this. I don't always love these kind of Oriflamme effects, but I also don't ever love playing random 0/3 walls for 3 that just block and don't have a chance to trade at all with any of their creatures. But there are a lot of smaller creatures in white that can benefit from the power boost, I should say. So I can see playing this sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the 0/3 body is a bit anemic, which is probably the biggest issue. 0/3 in some matchups doesn't block very much. But I mean, I see that the idea is to, play a flyer, then play this, and that increases your ability to race. The number of situations where you get to both attack and block effectively with this card doesn't seem like it would come up to me very much. You're either doing one or the other, in which case it's not as effective.
So we've seen Masked Blackguard, we've seen Frost Breath, Run Afoul, that's one we haven't seen yet. Target opponent sacrifices a creature with flying. So it's Plummet, but for 1 mana, but they get to choose. Doesn't seem great. Plummet's already sideboard card at best.
Yeah, I think the 2 mana on Plummet, reducing that by 50% can be strong in terms of being able to play multiple spells in one turn, but it's not always going to be that relevant. I think usually, as you said, a Plummet is a sideboard card when your opponent has like a rare flyer or a number of flyers. If they have a number of flyers, say in a dedicated flyers deck, this can be strong, but if you're using it to try and kill, say, a Baneslayer Angel or a big demon, like a Gourmand or something, then having this potentially be blocked by one of their other flyers seems like it would be the worst possible scenario.
Yeah. Kind of cool looking dinosaur, but...
Yeah, very cool looking dinosaur. Very red. As I said before, it's probably the camera itself.
Silent Dart. So 1 mana artifact, 4 tap sacrifice, deals 3 to a creature. We seem to be getting these as well in quite a few sets. It's okay, but 4 is a lot.
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be a ton of synergies with this. Like in this set, there's not really any artifact themes or anything like that, and not really any creatures with protection from any colors that you need to kill, so...
There are also a lot of X4s and X5s.
Yeah, so in general, paying 5 mana to kill a 3 toughness creature, which will probably cost 4 mana or less, is not the best rate. Although, you know, in some matchups, especially I'd say if you need ways to deal with flyers, this could be okay.
Yeah.
Since, you know, it can take out flyers at a reasonably effective rate, but in general, not the strongest.
Ornery Dilophosaur. 4 cost 2/2 Death Touch. Whenever it attacks, if you control a large creature, it gets +2/+2. A larger Death Touchy creature tends not to be super relevant unless they're trying to gang block and kill it. That's when Death Touch can be good on a larger creature. And 4 cost 2/2s, I mean, you'd rather have whatever the Viper is that's a Moss Viper. 1 cost 1/1 Death Touch most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem a bit strange, since if you're attacking with the other 4 power creature and they can double block, then usually they might kill that. Or if you have multiple strong creatures that are attacking, as you said, Death Touch is not the most powerful ability on this creature, since in order to make this effective as an attacker, you need to have another large creature already. So I find it hard to imagine a situation where this can trade up.
Sanguine Indulgence. 4 cost sorcery. It costs only 1 if you've gained 3 or more life this turn, and you get to return 2 creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. That seems like it would function reasonably well in any white-black deck, and often even in just a black deck, given that there are quite a few black lifelinkers.
Yeah, I would say the only thing with this is that the play pattern where you get to attack, lifelink, they trade, then you get to play this is really strong, but usually these kind of cards, you want them to be good when you're behind as well.
Yeah.
So not being able, like, usually with a Raise Dead effect, you can usually play the Raise Dead and the creature on the same turn.
True.
With this, you can not as often do that. In fact, probably pretty rarely, given that it costs 4 mana, which I think makes it a lot worse, since if you're consistently gaining 3 life a turn, that's probably what you want to do. So, and I think black already has a lot of disincentives for the opponent to trade with your creatures. So just with all the morbid things.
Yeah.
So probably a bit worse from that perspective.
Makes sense. Revitalize is a way to gain 3 life and turn that on that kind of synergizes pretty well. So again, in that black-white deck, I could see it working, but it's definitely not one that I'd be rushing to play. Yeah. Thrill of Possibility we've discussed, and Cancel is pretty trash as always, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has been good in some scenarios. In super slow decks, in sealed especially, you need some way to deal with bombs, but, you know, still not being able to deal with a card that's just resolved means that too often you're using your cancel just on a card that you don't want to, just so you don't fall too far behind not having to keep the mana up every turn, which can be quite disadvantageous.
Alright. So, shall we move on to pack 5? We've got a Forest, so no dual land this time, and Necromentia, which is definitely not getting played. There's a lot of text on this card, but basically you can get something out of their deck or hand or graveyard, and they get a 2/2.
Yeah, so it's a long one in the long line of sort of effects that you pick a card and then you remove it, which have always been more for constructed than limited.
And we've got the Black Sanctum. So I think this is probably the best one. I don't know. This one, the blue one, and the green one are all okay on their own. Draining for 1 every turn is pretty slow. But if you can get it up to draining for 2 with either the blue or the green one, that's a reasonable threat.
Yeah, I think so.
For only 2 mana. Like,
yeah, I think especially since there are, as you said, some other black life gain payoffs, it seems difficult to imagine a deck where you can effectively get multiple shrines, especially since they're legendary.
Yeah.
So you have to, if you have 3 different shrines in your deck, you have to be 3 colors, which, is definitely not impossible, but it gives you a number of deck building restraints just in itself.
Falconer Adept, I really like. It can be a little awkward, given that it's a 4-drop and its body is not incredible. There are going to be times when you can't attack with it profitably, but if you can, either by giving it flying the following turn with the common that gives another creature flying, or by putting any kind of enchantment or combat trick on it, or a combat trick I should say, it starts to generate value pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think so as well. Of course, 4 mana 2/3 is not the best, but I think even still trading in combat and getting a bird is okay, and it's not that hard in your white decks especially to maneuver a situation where it can just run away with the game.
Leafkin Avenger. So this is another one. I really like how they're tending to put these kind of signpost uncommons in most color combinations in most sets now. It's pretty cool. So 4 cost 4/3, and you get to ramp really quickly. At least tap for 1, because this is a 4/3 itself, but potentially tap for multiple mana. So ramping after turn 4 is not the best necessarily. Thanks, Sam, for liking the stream. It's 8 mana as well, I should mention, deals damage equal to its power to player or planeswalker. So being able to go to the dome later is really relevant. The fact that that's not creature or planeswalker, some may see as a downside because you can't use it as removal for a creature, but I feel like a lot of the time just being able to dome people is pretty cool.
Yeah, it ends the game pretty quickly. I'd say the only drawback with these sort of cards is that red and green already have quite a few 4 and 5 drops that are pretty powerful.
Yeah.
They're more missing out in the 2 and 3 mana department.
Yeah.
Not so much the 3 mana department, but the fact that there's no sort of Llanowar Elves or Rampant Growth means that playing this on turn 3 is not so possible, as we sort of talked about with the Llanowar Visionary. So, of course, playing this on turn 4 can be strong, but, you do need to follow it up with, 2 spells pretty quickly, I think, to make this card as effective as it could be.
Cool. Duress is never a particularly appealing card in Limited, but with some Spells Matters synergies, a little better here.
Yeah, I think it can be okay. I mean, with the Spells Matters decks, there are a lot of situations where your opponent might have, 9, 10, even more targets for the Duress in the deck, and, especially if they have a bomb, like the Sublime Possibility, or the
Sublime Epiphany.
Sublime Epiphany, or something like that.
Yep.
Or a shrine deck potentially. Then this has the opportunity to be good.
Life Goes On, and I think that's probably where we'll leave that one. Gale Sweeper, which is what I was referencing when I was talking a little earlier about what's it called, the bird creator, Falconer Adept. If you play your Falconer Adept on turn 4, play your Gale Sweeper on turn 5. It's pretty nice, and it's not too hard a play pattern to put together.
Yeah, I think this card is quite strong. I mean, 4 mana, 3/2 flying is already good, and giving something flying is a really good ability if you have a lot of cheap white aggressive creatures. I like how white has multiple creatures at common that give multiple stat boosts. I think that's really strong for white aggressive decks to make sure that your creatures aren't outclassed later.
Absolutely.
And so this is, I like that with a white creature base, then you have just a number of ways to make it difficult for your opponent to block without playing any cards that require, a lot of other creatures to have value. They're all good on their own.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best white commons in the set, personally. Wishcoin Crab,
I think this card is
it's
quite
okay?
good, actually,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm not usually a fan of the 4 mana blue dork that just sits there defensively, but
Oh, well, I think 2-5 is a good body. Like 7.
2 is a lot better than 1. So we had in Ikora, we had Cry Station, which I think was a 1-6 or something.
Yeah.
Much rather have a 2-5.
Yeah, I think, especially with the Onake Ogre and, a lot of 3-2s and 2-2s from red, this card, it just has the ability to brick wall a lot of decks, and the 4 power matters as well.
Yep.
So especially against red decks, I think this is one of the better 4 drops in blue if you're defensively minded.
I wouldn't play this. It's probably better in sealed, and it's certainly better game 2 and 3 if you can side in against the right deck. But I wouldn't be picking this like particularly high, even in blue pick order. I'd pick it ahead of the counter spells, but probably not many of the other creatures, I don't think.
Yeah, but I think having these sort of cards in your sideboard means that against certain decks, you just have the ability to sort of get a lot of value out of your later picks, which I think is really good.
Yeah. Definitely rather it be that than another useless counterspell. Legion's Judgment, sorcery speed removal, but it can hit any of the larger creatures in the set, of which there are probably more than the average, I think. Or there's certainly a lot of relevant larger creatures in this set, and yeah, giving white decks a way to deal with them is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I like these kind of cards since, this and Plummet and all of those other situational cards that the situations in which they're good are not usually very obfuscated. It's usually pretty clear. Your opponent has lots of 4 power creatures, you can bring this in. But
Yep.
I think having more ways to make your sideboard more relevant in Limited is, I think, really strong, since this can be one of the best cards in your deck in a lot of matchups.
Great. So another Pride Malkin, which, as we mentioned, good in green-white, but certainly has uses in even green-blue with flyers, green-black.
Also very cute.
Also very cute. Cryptolocker, we've discussed as well.
Not so cute.
Alpine Watchdog.
Also very cute.
Quite cute and very stoic looking, but also quite good. We've had 2-cost 2-2s with nothing for a long time, and then we started getting 2-cost 2-2s with lifelink in Bishop, Soldier, and others. Vigilance, not always better than lifelink, sometimes better, sometimes worse, but a good ability nonetheless.
Yeah, I think the fact that there are lots of, as we said, there are lots of, power boosters and just cards that make creatures stronger, makes this a pretty solid card in a lot of white decks. A bit of a role player.
Yep, just kind of a solid creature to have in your deck. Hobble Fiend, 2-cost 2-1 trample. Sacrifice another creature, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Not terribly exciting given the dearth of token generators, as we said, but there are a lot of things that, well, not a lot, but some black cards in particular that reward you for being in the graveyard. And if you can get that working with this, it can get to being, even if it's a 4/3, having been your 2 mana play that's then enabling some better plays for you later, that's a reasonable rate of investment, but it does require some work.
Yeah, I've always liked cards like this, just being able to sort of steal your opponent's creature and then sacrifice it. I've always thought was cool.
Yeah.
So, in combination with that, of course, but also just to gain some incidental value from, like, if they pacify or capture sphere your creature, if they point a removal spell at your creature, I think, and having a creature that grows, especially a trampler, can be really strong, even if there's no explicit, token makers in this set so much that let you, build around this in the sense of being able to put all of your creatures into this and then attacking as much.
I'm just trying to discern exactly what's going on in this art. It looks extremely hurtful and horrific and painful, but I'm not sure whether a limb is being munched on or a head or something, but anyway, someone's dying.
Exactly.
Oh, and last card in the pack is Read the Tides. So it's either a draw 3 or bounce 2 creatures, both of which are a little underpowered for 6 mana, and it's sorcery speed. I don't like it.
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely a bit below rate in both modes, maybe even a lot below rate for the second mode.
Yeah.
Which makes it a lot worse. The flexibility gains a little bit, but usually in this if you're playing this kind of card, you're playing it for the first mode, which means that you're usually not going to be very tempo oriented. I like the idea, that, some sort of slow, ridiculous draw a ton of cards deck can be good, and, I like trying to make, and a lot of people, especially even me, like trying to make those decks work. So I think it's strong from that perspective, in that you can do a lot of different things with like, multicolored decks or shrine decks, as we mentioned.
Yep.
But I think, it really requires a lot of work to make it a card that's good. Or maybe something like you have Shipwreck, the Shipwreck Diver, Shipwreck Dowser maybe. The 5 mana 3/3 prowess that gets an instant or sorcery
that's very
back.
strong.
Yeah,
I think that might be the best blue common or uncommon.
So being able to use that with this, or the blue-red uncommon that gets the card back, I think they're both ways to make this more powerful, since just having one copy of this in your deck can provide advantage multiple times. But I think, in general, a bit slow for most blue decks.
All right, and we're on to the final pack. Shall we do the pre-release special rare before we go on to the last pack?
Maybe we do the last pack first.
Do the last pack first?
I feel, yeah.
We'll keep people waiting just a little bit longer. So, zombie token, a Scoured Barons, so a little bit of relevant fixing, a foil Epitaph Golem.
I like the art. I like the sort of Avacyn symbol.
Yeah, it is cool. And rare-wise, another Ghostly Pilfer, as if we double tap on a rare.
Oh, that's fun.
Oh well, I mean, it's consistent in a sealed pool. Can't complain about that. Ring Wingmare, you're going to hose yourself with this reasonably often. I don't love it.
Yeah, I've found that actually being the case in my white decks. I mean, 3 mana 2/1 flyer is not terrible.
It's worse than Windrake. Like, I don't...
Yeah.
For an uncommon, I'd be expecting more.
Yeah, but yeah. I don't think it's great, but I think if you have few non-creature spells and it can, it has a chance to put your opponent off a turn. I think if you have many fewer non-creature spells than your opponent, I think it's better than Windrake.
Yep.
But that's not that easy to set up. But white, I think, is a good color for it.
Yep. If it's going to work anywhere, it's going to be white. Card Sale Freebooter. We both like this card.
Yeah, another really strong card. We talked about it in our set review. That probably hasn't gone up yet, since we're halfway through writing it.
Yep.
But yeah, definitely this will give you advantage at a lot of points in the game. Getting to see your opponent's hand is really strong, and it's going to be really hard for your opponent to deal with this without spending a card themselves.
Malefic Scythe, another one that we both really like. It's 1 to equip is really good when you're potentially looking at +3/+3 or +4/+4 without too much effort, so long as this has come down early. And even if it comes down in the mid game, getting it up to +2/+2 is not too hard, at which point it's a serious upgrade.
Yeah,
to most
for
creatures.
sure. I think, as long as your deck isn't too creature light, and you can trade off a couple times or have some sacrifice synergies, then this can take over the game really quickly.
Then we've got Sabertooth Mauler, which we've talked about. Anointed Chorister, one of the other lifelink options in white, which pumps for 5, which is a lot, but when it has lifelink, I'm okay with that, I think. So if I was going to play a 1/1, this would be reasonably close to the top of the...
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of the Brushwag somewhat.
Yeah, it's similar to Brushwag, 1 more to pump, but I think lifelink slightly better than Trample most of the time on a smaller creature. Roaming Ghostlight, another good one. So this pool rather is looking very good from a blue perspective. Scry 3, then reveal a top card of your library. If it's a creature or land card, draw a card. Don't love it.
Yeah, I mean, 2 mana is a lot to spend for this kind of effect. I think in the late game, it has the ability to sort of, especially if you have a lot of creatures, in the late game it has the potential to draw you a bit more than a card, because scrying extra lands to the bottom when they're not useful can be really powerful.
Yep.
But in general, I wouldn't want to play too many of this, just because of the tempo hit of not affecting the board.
Blood Glutton, aside from being strangely difficult to say, is quite a good card, I think. Like 4 lifelinking power is a lot.
Yeah, I'm not so sold on 5 mana, 3 toughness.
True.
I think that's not the best sort of rate, especially since, you can get 3 power. That means it'll trade down most of the time.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it's strong against decks with lots of flyers, since it's really good in a racing situation. And it can be good when you're blocking as well to, return it since they need to deal with it. But I do think that, you know, a lot of the time it won't necessarily trade against the bigger creatures, but whether that's, like, that can be good for 5 mana, especially if you have other lifelink synergies.
Cancel again. Valor Steed again. Igneous Cur. And Lofty Denial. So that's the end of that pool, other than...
Oh, wow.
A Massacre Worm.
Another Massacre Worm. Did you see that before?
No.
Oh, no, man.
So that is...
you just... it seemed like you were already expecting it.
No. Double Massacre Worm. All right.
Okay.
Take it out of the plastic.
Yeah. I would be careful. I've had that plastic I found pretty tricky to open.
Yep. I won't use the knife for this one.
That's probably for the best.
But yeah, wow.
Very pretty.
All right.
Should we maybe go back to our faces for a little bit?
Sure.
Or
Let's just we'll just take a look at the pool, I think.
Oh, sure.
total.
Yeah. We can look at maybe
so
building
just the res.
a
We
deck.
don't want to build the whole deck. I think
sure.
People have probably seen plenty in this video already, but I think we've got take out the Necromantia. So we've got 3 good blue rares.
And 2
amazing
worms. Yeah.
black mythics. Yeah, I think we can probably see which direction this sealed pool's going in.
Yeah, and we have 2 searchlights as well.
Yep.
Maybe we could just go through the black and blue cards quickly.
Yeah, sure. So we'll just divide those out.
Yeah, not all, not like necessarily building a deck, but, just looking at what it might look like.
I'll put the Lofty Denial in just for the purposes of the exercise. And the cancels, but yeah, there's definitely quite a few relevant cards going on here. One thing is that we didn't see any opts or anything like that, which is a bit annoying. We got multiple hits on the counter spells that we probably don't want to play and missed some of those value cards. So we did get one rookie mistake, which I was happy about.
Yes, but with the 2 Massacre Worms, we'd probably be looking for a more controlling deck anyway, and less of a spells matters thing. So I don't think that's as big a deal as it would be if we had more of the prowess and aggressive card support, where opt it really shines.
So perhaps we know that we've got 2 2-drops, a Storming Entity that does want some spells, but it's fine as a 5-drop.
Yeah, exactly.
And then 2 Massacre Worms at 6. And then we'll just fix the focus here and come in again on these cards. Okay. So Mind Right, so we can leave out for now. We've got Rookie Mistake, Deathbloom Thallid as a perfectly serviceable early play. The Enthralling Holds we might play in a more controlling shell, because what we can't kill with Massacre Worm, perhaps we can steal with Enthralling Hold.
Mm-hmm.
Mask Blackguards can help us early if we need to stabilize the curve. Frost Breath, Sanguine Indulgence we'll think about. Recurring Massacre Worm is pretty amazing. Cancels we probably won't play. Sanctum might be too slow and weird, particularly without another shrine. Duress, Wishcone Crab.
I think it could be good. I mean,
Could
if we're just looking to survive until the Massacre Worms, and the Massacre Worm can sort of defend it against the flyers, we're mostly looking at the big ground creatures that we need to worry about.
We've got the Cryptolocker, Read the Tides. Having the Scythe is awesome. And it makes cards like Card Sale Freebooter a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
It also makes sacrificing things to the Cryptolocker more appealing.
Yep, and also it makes the ghostly guys
the
a lot
Pilferer.
better, since they'll almost always trade. Your opponent will want to trade with them at every opportunity.
Absolutely. So then we've got Ghostlight, which we've discussed is just a great hit. Cancels, which we might play. Blood Glutton probably won't make it, considering how many 5 and 6 drops we've got. Lofty Denials we may consider, but still probably not.
I think the Blood Glutton could actually be okay. I think a lot of the drawbacks of it, that it trades with 3/2s and stuff, are sort of somewhat tempered by the multiple Massacre Worms. I mean, a lot of things can be helped by the multiple Massacre Worm.
That's true. Kind of makes everything else better. Gloom Soul, we don't really have any Reanimate anyway, so we won't play that. We'll play the other Ghostlight. Capture Sphere will hopefully keep us alive. Jeskai Elder.
I'd say maybe not. I'd say probably the Blackguards would be better.
Because we've got 2 of those,
Yeah.
which is going to be good. The Frost Breaths actually might be okay in this deck. Like, depending on how it plays out with the final build, being able to delay their board until the Massacre Worm comes down.
Potentially, it is good with the ghostly guys as
It's good
well.
with the Ghostly Pilferers, yep. And then another Cryptolocker, and probably won't play the Mind Rot. So all in all, I think that's
Pretty
a pretty
strong.
serviceable pool.
Yeah. Okay, so did you want me to maybe keep talking while you do the camera?
Well,
or...
let's sign off for the video for YouTube. So
okay, yeah,
thanks for watching. We'll be back with Jess's pool very shortly. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. Cheers.
Okay, thanks so much. See you later.